Spanning Gateway, this is part 3. I want to go over the symbology of this little diagram that I drawn, and I call it symbology because it is symbology. If we understand what symbology is, um, symbology is symbols, right? And we can understand that drawings are symbols. Words are also symbols within themselves, and they hold purpose, meaning, and reasoning in order to communicate. So this is what the ancients were doing. That's how they have their calendars as well, because they were interpreting information and communicating their ideas, thoughts, and visions. And I know it's backwards, and that's the amazing part about spirit is we can use our minds to analyze information and come to conclusions about what things are for ourselves, right? So which also gives you the ability to see, not just with your physical eyes, but you're being able to see and interpret information through that way. But I want to go over these things because I want to bring things into awareness, into the light. That's why it's important to understand what light is, and how the sun is related to that as well, because it has to do with information, being able to see. So I'm talking about spiritually see through perception and perspective and senses, okay? Because senses are a way that we're able to see through the dark, not having all the information. We're able to sense things through information by combining the light and the dark, feminine and masculine principles. Okay, this is natural. These are spiritual natures through science that we're able to communicate these thoughts and ideas and interpret for ourselves to come to our own conclusions, and understand for ourselves. Okay, so when we're dealing with the Jew as a noun, a person, place, or thing. So any person or place or thing can be a Jew. Just as a matter of the perspective you take it in, but we're going to talk about people. Okay, so. And these are just different beliefs until you decide for yourselves if that is an actual reality of what a Jew is. So, hold on. So a Jew is an inhabitant of Judea, which once we dive deeper into the symbology of the words, the purpose, meaning, and reason, we can see that an inhabitant is indwelling. Inhabitant is something that's done internally, right? Because it has the words in, which is signified as being within something. So inhabitant, or to inhabit, does not mean just a physical thing. We can now take the perspective of the spiritual level, because we know that there are many indwellings in the spirit. So in inhabitant, we can look at it two different ways, as if it's a physical thing in a place or location of Judea, right? Because Judea, just when we get to its natural essence, is just a location, and the location will be an indwelling, which will be inside. But that's if we just go on a deeper level of seeing these words and not just seeing the superficial definition, because definition is good, so much so good that we have high definition on our TVs, but it also blinds you from everything else that is happening around that. Around circles are very important to understand, because it gives you a whole perspective of the light and the dark. So, and just us knowing that these are not spooky things, these are not evil, demonic things, that's going to scare you away from information. This shit is deep. So an inhabitant of Judea, okay? So it's important for us to have our own understanding about what Judea is and what is an inhabitant. And we can see the polarity of inhabitant through something being physical, an inhabitant physically in a location, or inhabitant in a spiritual location. Okay, so also a Jew is a person whose religion is Judaism. Okay, so that's another way of identifying that, But just because you slap a name on that doesn't make something what it really is, right? Because a lot of people hold titles that are undeserving, and we find that true in many aspects of our society that we live in, where a lot of things are being brought to the light about people, right? Because we slap a name, a title on them, or we see them in certain lights. So we just have to know the foundation of that principle of knowing the polarity, if a person is or isn't. That's up to the spirit to decide. So they're holders of religious laws, okay? So they're very familiar with laws, and there's a duality, polarity to that, because the laws are not just physical things that we participate in the society, but they are also spiritual laws. And there are many spiritual laws depending on whatever system is in place. 4,000 years old, okay? So this religion has been active in action in the light for an extended long thousands of years of time. So a lot of things have been able to manifest and build upon throughout this time. And the good word to identify is build, because it is definitely a system of building, and you can see the outcome of that fruit that they bear, right? Just take a spiritual look at that fruit that so-called Jew bears, whether that's an individual Jew or the Jews collectively, those who consider themselves to be Jews. But um, there's definitely a limited perspective on who Jews really are, because not all Jews are out in the light, in the forefront to see. So, and this is this is off of my perspective. I'm just bringing things in the light for you to come to your own conclusion, and also information that you can find out for yourself if you so choose. This is just to look at things objectively. And so Jews also feel, some Jews, not all, because this is not pertaining to all, right? It's based on the individual spirit and their perspective of seeing themselves and seeing others. So some things think that Jew is a race of people, although it is not, but it is duality at the same time, right? Two things exist at the same time. Because people definitely do believe that Jews are a race of people. Okay, so, but not everybody does. And this is something that happens in the mind. Definitely they have control of their narrative, right? Because they definitely believe they are God's chosen people. So they control that narrative, and depending on how you think a Jew to be, if you're not sure what type of energy that name holds, then you're giving your power away to that individual's being. And it has everything to how you identify with yourself, because if you think that you have a lineage of slavery and that's all you know of your lineage, which is really a disrespect to the to who people perceive their ancestors to be. But ancestors is even a superficial word of describing the predecessors, thanks to Dolo. So spiritual predecessors. Um, and another way of identifying and bringing to the light is that they consider themselves Jewish. They're not under any color system, okay? They're not under any color system. It's very much a system. It's a social status. It's a status, and it's actually a status in law, and how you are going to be treated within the society based off of a label, a title, a color, which is also an appearance and a way of covering. It's a color, a cover, color. When you paint a color on something, you change its appearance. This is a spiritual principle, not just physically. As people have many things that they do to change their color, their appearance. But it's us being able to see these things. So God's chosen people is an ideology through Judaism, or maybe an individual Jewish belief that they're God's chosen people. Um, God's chosen people should be looked at through the bloodline, right? Right? If they're descendants and through that lineage, that's why it's important to understand lineage, because lineage is definitely an individual thing, especially when it's spiritual. To know your individual lineage. Lineage is not just knowing all your predecessors, it's deeper than that because it's in the spirit. So there's a spiritual lineage, right? Because if God is in spirit and he's has chosen people, that means that lineage has been passed down. So you can see that as a physical thing or a spiritual thing, just depending on your level of awareness and your perception you want to take. Um, Hebrew language or Hebrew symbology really was before English. So English is definitely a descendant from Hebrew, right? From that knowledge and interpretation of symbology before English was even created because uh, uh, language has a lineage within itself. You can go into the lineage of language. That's why it's important to understand that lineage is not just a flesh, physical, third dimensional thing. All these things have lineage. English has lineage, Hebrew has lineage, tradition has lineage, law has lineage. It's all through evolution and of time and consciousness when we're dealing with things of the mind, being intellectual. The Jewish calendar is not just a representation of the 12 months, but it has everything to do with law, culture, and tradition. These are spiritual things and being able to spiritually build. And then you can see the fruit of that labor. You can spiritually take it, go see, look at it, who you consider to be Jewish, the Jewish community, and then you can attribute that, relate that to the fruit that they bear, where they're standing. Um, yeah, so these are very much spiritual things because there's spiritual laws, spiritual culture, and spiritual tradition. These things are, it's not separate. Life, the flesh is not separate from the spirit. They all happen simultaneously. So this is through knowledge and being able to calculate through the calendar. And there's many traditions built off of these calculations. That's why there's many ritualistic practices to keep things in a repetitive, continuous cycle. Um, they're definitely scholars, right? Jewish people are scholars, or there's many different levels to people's beliefs and whatever, just depending on where they are on the spectrum. But there's Jewish that are definitely scholars, so they are very aware of language and how to use it. So it's not like these things are not known. We can come up to our own conclusions about what things are, and we can make judgments and decide for ourselves. But once we are able to dive deeper into what a Jewish person is, and not just see it in a superficial level, because that'll just seeing this little box, this little bubble binding right here, blind you from everything else that is happening outside of that, and then you only be operating yourself from that limited perspective. And it happens through the mind, which will play out in your actions, into your everyday existence, and how you interact in the world. That's why it's very important to understand these things and get a deeper understanding, for lack of a better word, for ourselves.